So tonight we're going to talk about the women of Nappanee, just because this is the 100th year of women's rights to vote, and um, just something. And we've never really highlighted women except for in this year where we had the women behind the men of the kitchen industry and the women of Nappanee now. So I'm going to talk. I think I want to say almost close to 30 women that I'll talk about in some capacity, and all of the information that I gathered about them, just because they are women and women throughout history are not very well documented, is through their obituaries. So I learned about them through their obituaries.
Well, that's kind of sad.
Yeah, it is. Um, and I yeah, so some I can go into very much detail about, but others um, not so much. So first is Barbara Staley, and she is actually the first Amish woman to have lived in our area, and she came to America in 1835 from Germany, and her husband actually passed away before the family came to America. The land that where she lived is actually um, the historic farm at the Barns of Nappanee, and the land that she had owned is on the National Historic Registry, and it's the only Amish farm in the country to be on that registry. Currently, we have her original tombstone also at the Nappanee Center that will go on display in the Emma Gallery once that's finished. Next, I have Emma Pippinger, and she is the daughter of Lewis and Sarah Walker Winder. She was married to Jacob Pippinger on October 4th, 1874, and he actually drove a truck for the creamery of the George Freese Creamery. Um, Something about Emma is she ran the Nappanee House, so Nappanee's first hotel. Her father Lewis had originally ran the Nappanee House after moving to Nappanee, and then Emma and her husband took possession of it after the former owners could not produce a clear title of ownership after trying to sell it, and they closed the Nappanee House in 1905. Um, and then her children were Bessie and Edgar, and um, Bessie's actually next. So Bessie Huffman, and she's the daughter of Jacob and Emma Pippinger. She was married twice. Her first husband was Otto Wilt, and they were married on January 29th, 1905. I am not quite unsure what happened with their marriage because I couldn't find any divorce records or anything like that, because I know he lived well after she remarried. Her second husband was Roy Huffman, and they were married on September 6th, 1911. And he ran Huffman's Bakery after his father, Ogen passed away. Bessie grew up in Lock Township, and she was a woman kind of out of her time because after Roy's death, she assumed ownership and management of Huffman's Bakery, known for their mother bread products, and ran it successfully with the help of her brother Edgar and her son Liesel. And she was a 50-year member of the Order of the Eastern Star, and she just had her one child, Liesel. So next is Nora Blessing, and she's the daughter of William and Adeline Rusher, and she married Herman Blessing on March 23rd, 1918. And there's not much about Herman except for that he was a farmer. She is thought to be Nappanee's first librarian when Nappanee had the ladies' librarianess, or the Ladies Library Association. So she worked as the librarian when it was just a small bookcase, and it was placed in a millinery store. And there was about 100 books that circulated, and the books were only available on Saturday afternoons. And Nora Shively was her supervisor, who Nora also served on the first library board, and I'll get to her. The library was in the store for 2 or 3 years, and it actually progressed elsewhere. So next I have Bessie Brown, and she is the daughter of Clarence and Elizabeth Brown. And her claim to fame is she taught the cartoonist. She taught 5 out of 6 cartoonists because she taught art in first grade in the Nappanee schools in the early 1900s to 1925 was when she left. She then taught taught at Goshen schools for 6 years, and then she taught in Indianapolis for 18 years. She encouraged her students to doodle, and that's why many credit her for the success and inspiration of Merrill Blosser, Henry Moss, Mike Parks, Fred Neer, and Bill Holman. She also served on the very first library board when the library board was organized in 1919, and she lived in the Beeger home in Mishawaka that later in life, which the Beeger home was for the elderly, and it opened in February 1st, 1930 and ceased operation in 1967. It's now known as the Beeger Mansion. So next I have Nora Shively, and she's the daughter of Perry and Eliza Early, which she was married to Early Shively in 1907, and he owned Shively Hardware Store for over 60 years, which that would be in the old Martin Hardware building. Nora served on the first library board when it was created in 1919, and she was one of the first promoters for public library. She's also the type of historian, since she in 1939 wrote the history of the Nappanee Public Library from 1921 to 1939. She was a member of the Thursday Club and served as president of the library board when the 1936 library was built. And she had 2 children, Robert and Helen. So next I have Caroline Pippinger Petit, which she was the daughter of Samuel and Sarah Holderman, in which she married John Pippinger on August 15th, 1880, and they divorced between 1890 and 1900. But she started the first millinery in Nappanee and was in the millinery trade for about 40 plus years. She remarried in 1901 to Charles Petit, and she had 3 children, Henry, Georgia, and Guy. She also lived in Wakarusa for a bit of time. So next I have Elizabeth Kaufman, and she is the daughter of Washington and Catherine Norris. And she was the wife of A.H. Kaufman, and they were married on June 18th, 1902. In 1896, A.H. Kaufman had opened a hardware store in Nappanee after moving from LaGrange. After A.H.'s death in 1923, she continued to have interest in the store. She was a charter member of the Order of the Eastern Star, and she was a past matron and was a charter member of the current club. And she also served as the treasurer of the Missionary Society for 35 years. Next, I have Nellie Stoops, which she was the daughter of John and Abigail Stauffer, and the wife of Claude Stoops, which they were married on February 25th, 1896, in which he operated a jewelry store when he came to Nappanee from Noble County. He started the Nappanee Telephone Company, and he was a champion for the Nappanee Library. Even though he passed away before the construction on the 36th building was started, he raised funds and even went to Washington, D.C. to try and get funds to help with the building, and he went to New York City to talk to the Carnegie Foundation to see if there was any funds left for libraries. Her family, Nellie's family, moved into Nappanee proper when she was 9 years old, and they lived on their homestead before that, which is now Stauffer Park. She attended the University of Valparaiso, where she studied piano and voice, and she taught piano and voice for many years in Nappanee. She was the youngest child, so when her mother passed away, she kept house for her father until she married Claude. And she was interested in the work of the Nappanee Choir and was the director for some time. She was a part of the Women's Christian Temperance Union and a charter member of both the Current and Thursday Club. They had 4 children, Donald, John, Lamar, and Dorothy, which Donald married the first Nappanee Public Library librarian. So next I have Belle Stauffer, which she was the daughter of Hal and Mary Jones, and she married Horace Stauffer, so Nellie's brother, on December 3rd, 1879. And like I said, Horace was Nellie Stuffer's brother. He attended medical school, and so he practiced medicine in Nappanee until 1898, and then he entered the insurance business after moving to Indianapolis, and served as a state representative for 2 terms and secured US 6 and State Road 19 to go through Nappanee while serving at the State House. Belle lived with her brother Albert after her parents passed away, and she attended the University of Valparaiso for music, where she met Horace when he was a medical student. In 1880, they moved to Chicago so that Horace could attend medical college, and then they moved to Nappanee in 1883, but returned after they left in 1898 to move to Indianapolis. They returned in 1919. She had been a past worthy matron of the Order of the Eastern Star. She was also a daughter of the American Revolution. She was the first one to suggest and promote the public library for Nappanee. And in many of the early newspapers, they credit Belle for having very much influence on having a public library because of her time in Indianapolis and having a public library there. And she had 1 child, Marion. Next, I have Melinda Pritchett, which she was the daughter of Henry and Mary Renfro, and she married Thomas Pritchett on September 2nd, 1877, and he was in real estate and insurance, and he was the one who didn't want the community building to be built, so he filed an injunction against it and lost. In 1885, they moved to Oregon with staying, but they soon returned to Indiana. They lived on a farm near Nappanee until May 21st, 1896, when they moved into Nappanee proper. And they had 2 children, Zay and Mabel, which Zay married Fred Kappas, who he was the son of Samuel and Lizzie Berlin Kappas. And a couple of the only things that I could find about Zay was that during the late war, she took an active part in work done by the ladies in furnishing supplies needed to alleviate the suffering of the on the great battlefields. She was a member of the Auction Bridge Club and a member of Current Club. I have Mabel, which I couldn't find anything really about Mabel since she died in 1967 and obituaries started not being so detailed. But she had married Carl Fries on December 23rd, 1911, and he had served as president of George Fries's Sons Creamery, president of the State Bank of Nappanee, and a member of the Masonic Temple. And he also served on the county council to fill a vacancy left from the death of Charles Mutchler. She did have one child, Carl Jr. Next, I have Clara Price, which she was the daughter of Benjamin and Elizabeth Mast, and she married Willard Price on August 7th, 1892, which Willard practiced medicine with his brother Delbert and son Douglas, and he was Nappanee's very first mayor. Clara was active in the Order of the Eastern Star. She was involved in the Bayview Club and Thursday Club, and was very active in temperance work. We have a quilt here at the Nappanee Center that her name is very prominently on it. So next I have Nellie Ewy, which she married Walter Uline in 1891, and he was a mayor of Nappanee. During the time that he was mayor, he erected the community building, and Nettie was very active in Thursday Club and in the Women's Christian Temperance Union. Next is Lizzie Kappas, or Lizzie Berlin. She was the daughter of John and Sue Ann Berlin, and in 1864 moved to Elkhart County with her parents from Ohio. She taught many years in public school, and many prominent citizens of Nappanee were proud of the fact that they had been her pupils. She married Samuel Kappas on May 12, 1867, in which he was one of the Kappas brothers, but sold his interests to Daniel Zook in 1890 so that he could devote his attention to the Farmers and Traders Bank and to the Kappas Hotel and Auditorium in Nappanee. In 1868, Samuel and Lizzie made a trip to Missouri via covered wagons, and they had a wonderful time, but in 1871, they decided to move back home and made their home in Nappanee. They had 9 children, and she attended the Presbyterian church and was a devoted mother and took delight in relating to her family and many other things to the pioneer days. So one of her daughters was Clara Rosenberg, which she married J. William Rosenberg on February 1st, 1899. Something fun about him is he was a professional baseball player, and he also taught band at Nappanee High School. One of the things that we do know about Clara is she was a charter member of the Current Club. Another one of Lizzie's daughters was Della Mutchler. She married Charles Mutchler on June 12, 1901, and Charles came from Goshen in 1896 to assist his brother Albert in the management of the Nappanee Canning Company and the Nappanee Furniture Company. And they were associated with the Kappases until 1914. She was a member of the first graduating class of Nappanee High School, a charter member of the Current Club. So another one of Lizzie's daughters is Myrtle Richards, which she was the wife of Harley, who they were married on February 5th, 1905, and they lived many years in Nappanee before moving to Pittsburgh. She served on the very first library board when it formed in 1919 and was a charter member of the current club and a charter member of the Order of the Eastern Star. And I believe that she served on the library board until about the 1930s when they moved to Pittsburgh. Next, I have Catherine Kappas, which she was married to Frank Kappas on September 20th, 1878 in South Bend, Indiana, which Frank was one of the Kappas brothers and was president of Kappas from 1902 until his death in 1939. Frank and Catherine lived in Locke for about a year after they were married before moving to Nappanee. In 1897, we know that she was one of the first presidents of the Women's Christian Temperance Union and had seen Nappanee grow from a community of a few houses to a striving little city. And she was also involved with the current club. Then next we have Melinda Kappas, which she was married to John Kappas on October 30th, 1878, and they were the first couple to be married in Nappanee. John was also one of the Kappas brothers, and who with his brothers formed Kappas Brothers. He was the first fire chief in Nappanee in 1892, and he was also the first to be arrested for running his horse too fast. Next, we have Margaret Mutchler, which she was married, or her parents were John and Mary Jane Ewy, and she was married to Albert Mutchler in 1897, which Albert moved to Nappanee from Goshen in 1893 to run the Nappanee Furniture Company. Margaret was a member of the Order of the Eastern Star and a charter member of the current club. It is said that her tall, queenly appearance and her dignified yet friendly bearing marked her as a true lady of the old school. Next, I have Elizabeth Zook, which her parents were Benjamin and Eliza Kappas Yarian. She was Daniel Zook's second wife, which Daniel had the first law practice in Nappanee when he came in 1882 from Goshen, and he served 4 years as the county clerk, and he purchased the interest of Samuel Kappas to enter the firm of Kappas Brothers and Zook. When they were married, he was 34 and she was 18, and she was a charter member of the current club. So next we have Evelyn, which she was the daughter of Frank and Nettie Lehman, and she married Fred on January 17, 1937. A fun thing about Fred and Evelyn when they were married on January 17, 1937, is that since Fred served on the fire department, he missed the auditorium fire due to being on their honeymoon, which it was said that Fred never forgave Evelyn for him missing out on the biggest fire in Nappanee. She graduated from Nappanee High School in 1928, Manchester College in 1932, and the University of Michigan with her master's in library science in 1934. Evelyn worked at the Goshen Public Library and was the director there for a time. And then she served as director at the Nappanee Public Library from 1957 to 1977. She established the Heritage Collection in 1971, and in 1989 it was renamed for her. She was a gifted storyteller, which she gave over 2,000 book and play reviews and historical programs. Her two famous ones were Mary Todd Lincoln and Dolly Madison. In the picture, she's seen in her iconic black dress, which it itself is a museum piece. since it was worn by a senator's wife when she was presented to Queen Victoria, which that dress is still in the collection today. I also just recently learned that in 1977, after Evelyn retired as the director of the Nappanee Public Library, she joined the board of trustees, only to resign in 1980 to become the director again while the library searched for a new director. Then she rejoined, once they hired a new director, she rejoined the board of trustees. Evelyn and Fred owned Fred's Flowers and the Nappanee Greenhouse from 1930 to 1984. She was an honorary member of the Thursday Club. And she also served on the Nappanee Historic Preservation Commission. Next, I have Dorothy Green, which she is the daughter of John and Cora Hoover, and she married Ralph Green on December 20th, 1941, which Ralph Green served as mayor for 1 year from 1962 to 1963 and served as the city clerk of Nappanee for 14 years. She was a former Cub Scout den mother, the chairwoman of the Bluebird Leaders, and one of the organizers for Open Door, and she served on that on the board of directors for Open Door for 28 years. Next, I have Betty Sinclair, which she was the wife of Robert Pat Sinclair, and they were married on June 7th, 1942. They were both Army veterans, and Robert, or Pat, was a former owner of the Culligan Water Softener Service in Nappanee. He was also a mayor of Nappanee. Betty served during World War II in the U.S. Women's Marine Corps, and they moved to Nappanee in 1948. She served on City Council for 4 years and also on the Nappanee Board of Works. She was a member of the Nappanee American Legion Auxiliary, a campfire assistant leader, and she served on the Campfire Council. She was also on the Red Cross Board of Directors and a co-chair for March of Dimes. Next, I have Margaret Newcomer, but she is the daughter of Ralph and Bertha Sechrist, and she was the wife of James Newcomer, which they were married on December 7, 1947. James was a city councilman for 8 years, and he was the mayor from 1972 to 1975, and owned E. Newcomer & Son Jewelers for 25 years. Margaret was a 1942 graduate of Nappanee High School and owned and operated Newcomer Jewelry Store after James's death. She was a member of the Nappanee American Legion and the VFW Auxiliaries, and a member of the Nappanee Order of the Eastern Star. So next I have Peg Hoffer. She was the daughter of Harold and Eva Mountjoy, but she was raised by her aunt and uncle Nettie and Erdie Himes. Her first husband, Leonard Sieber, who she married in August of 1943, was killed in Italy during World War II in 1945. Her second husband, Harold Hoffer, who she married November 18, 1950, had a twin brother, Gerald, and was a World War II Army veteran and served as a captain in the European theater and was involved in the Battle of the Bulge. Peg remembered when Herbert Hoover came to Nappanee in 1932, and she attended the Ball State Teachers College and worked at the State Capitol building in the State Auditor's office after college. In 1968, she was elected to the Wani School Community School Board and was involved in the decisions to merge Nappanee and Wakarusa. She was a precinct committee woman for the Republican Party, the vice chairman of the Elkhart County Republican Party, And she was also, in 1964, was designated by the Republican Party to cast one of Indiana's votes in the Electoral College if the Republican Party had carried Indiana. She was the chamber director after Harold's death, and she was the founding member of Pi Iota Pi, or Psi Iota Psi, sorry. And she belonged to the Thursday Club and the Friends of the Nappanee Public Library. And last, I have Bonnie Hosttler, who she moved to Nappanee from Memphis, Tennessee in 1961 and worked at McCormick Motors for 37 years as an executive secretary. In 1987, she joined the Nappanee Kiwanis Club, and that was the first year that Kiwanis opened their membership to women. In 2000, she was awarded the Secretary of the Year Award for Kiwanis. She received the Kiwanis International George Hickson Fellowship Award in 2004. And she was a charter member of the Nappanee Neighborhood Watch Committee when it formed in 1996. She was a member of the American Legion Post 154 Auxiliary and was presented with the Silver Beaver Award from the LaSalle Council of Scouting, and she was designated a James E. West Fellow by the Boy Scouts of America in 2010. In 2017, she was the Citizen of the Year, presented by the Nappanee Chamber of Commerce. So now I know I talked about the women being in a lot of different service clubs, so I thought I would just share a few and what each of them did. So first we have the Ladies Library Association, and March 27th, 1895, they held their first meeting. Their first officers were President Alma Brown, Secretary Clara Kappas, and Treasurer Eliza Early. So the committees were appointed on securing a room, constitution and bylaws, and for procuring a list of books for consideration. They began with 178 books, and membership was $1 a year. And single books could be borrowed for 2 weeks. And membership's dues could be paid to Mr. Claude Stoops. On October 23rd, 1895, it was decided to hold a benefit at Kappas Hall in November, and the proceeds went to purchasing books. They raised $13.45. Like I said, when talking about Nora, the first librarian of the Ladies Library Association's library, it moved to a variety of different places. Some of the places that I found was the Carriage Works, Hartman Hall, January of 1899. They were located in the Women's Relief Corps room over the Fiddler and Rickert store. And in 1900, they moved to the millinery shop. I'll actually expound on the libraries, the Ladies Library Association in March when I do a program on the history of Nappanee Public Library. The current club was organized in 1907, and their constitution and bylaws were adopted on January 27, 1908. Catherine Kappas was their first hostess, and the program was miscellaneous literary program with current events. And when they did roll call, they had to do a brief review of a current event of interest to all members. I don't know much about the Order of the Eastern Star, but that it was a Mason group, and it was open to both men and women. The men needed to be a master Mason, and the women needed to be a daughter, widow, wife, sister, or mother of a master Mason. Thursday Club began as a social and Sewing Club in 1899 and was originally called the Thimble Club. In 1908, it reorganized into a literary club and named the Thursday Club. And the creation of the Thursday Club resulted from weekly meetings at Mrs. J.W. Carpenter's house. They met to knit and sew items for children. Like I said, 9 years later, they changed their focus on becoming a literary group, and their work included locally supporting the high school band, furnishing books and glasses for students, and teaching Bible in school. Belle Stauffer actually decided that the group should rally behind the efforts to bring a public library to Nappanee, and the club worked in 1916 to start to raise funds for the public library, which in 1916 they had a art exhibit, which it raised $31.65. The Women's Relief Corps, really the only thing that I know about them is that they organized on April 2nd, 1894 with a membership of 32. And last but not least, I have the Women's Christian Temperance Union. It was not the first temperance union in Nappanee. There was the Anti-Tobacco Society that started in May of 1879, the Good Citizens League, or the Anti-Booze League, which was started in 1896. But the Women's Christian Temperance Union had been around in the 1890s, and they joined the ranks, the national ranks, in 1899 when 2 to 3 saloons existed at the time in Nappanee. We do know that the Good Citizens League, or the Anti-Tobacco Society had formed, and it wasn't a very good society because there was 5 cigar factories in Nappanee around the time that it was in existence. The Women's Christian Temperance Union held many lectures, and the Good Citizens League, it stood for a new liquor law called the Nickerson Law, which it gave voters the right to stall approval of the liquor license. So the Women's Christian Temperance Union had a regular meeting of 15 ladies, and they were held on the first and second Tuesday of each month, in which we have a quilt that they made in 1898 and auctioned off to raise funds. And I can't remember off the top of my head how much they had raised to go towards their efforts. We do know that the Women's Christian Temperance Union was still in existence in the 1980s in Nappanee.
Wow.
So that's all that I have. And